The Japanese code that turns average men into masters, and why most can't handle it. There is a lie so deeply embedded in modern culture that most men don't even question it anymore. It's repeated in schools, workplaces, social media, and even by well-intentioned parents. That lie is simple. Some people are just talented, and the moment a man believes that, he voluntarily places himself in the category of the replaceable. Because talent is the perfect excuse. It explains failure without demanding responsibility. It comforts the ego while killing ambition. When a man sees someone mastering a skill, building a business, dominating a craft, he tells himself, he was born with it. And just like that, the pressure is gone. But here's the uncomfortable truth most men never face. If talent were real, excellence would be evenly distributed. It isn't. In every field, business, combat sports, engineering, music, leadership, the pattern is always the same. Those who reach mastery are not the most gifted, they are the most submissive to process. Modern men don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because they refuse to kneel before repetition. We live in a culture that worships shortcuts. Work smart, not hard. Find your hack. Optimize everything. But mastery does not negotiate. It does not reward cleverness. It does not care about your opinions. Mastery demands something modern men hate: obedience before understanding. That's why most men stay average. They want to customize before they can execute. They want freedom before discipline. They want expression before structure. And when they don't see immediate results, they assume something is wrong with them, or worse, that the system doesn't work. Here's what actually happens. The average man quits right before the process starts working, because real progress begins only after the ego dies. The truth is brutal but liberating. There is no talent gap destroying your progress. There is a submission gap. The men who rise are not special. They simply accept a rule most men reject. Before you command, you obey. They obey the basics. They obey repetition. They obey boredom. They obey silence. And in that obedience, something dangerous is forged. While others chase motivation, they build systems. While others consume information, they train execution. While others look for confidence, they earn certainty through proof. The lie of talent keeps men average because it shifts the battlefield from effort to identity. If excellence is something you're born with, then trying becomes optional. And once trying is optional, discipline disappears. That's why modern men know a little about everything and master nothing. They read books, they watch videos, they collect frameworks, but they never let a single discipline dominate them long enough to change their nervous system. And mastery lives in the nervous system, not in ideas. The average man thinks excellence is an outcome. The disciplined man knows excellence is a standard you enforce when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when nothing is happening. This is where the separation begins. Because once you understand that talent is a lie, there is no place left to hide. You either submit to the process, or you stay average forever. Most men don't fail at the beginning. They fail in the middle. They start motivated. They start inspired. They start aggressive. New routine, new plan, new vision of themselves. For a few weeks, everything feels alive. Then something happens. The progress slows. The excitement fades. The novelty dies. And this is where the truth is revealed. Motivation is not the problem. Structure is. Men don't quit because they're weak. They quit because they built nothing solid enough to carry them when emotion disappears. Motivation is emotional fuel. Structure is mechanical power. Emotion burns fast. Structure endures. The modern man confuses intensity with consistency. He thinks showing up hard for a short period is strength. It isn't. Strength is returning when nothing feels rewarding. This is why most men live in cycles. They surge forward, they collapse, they reset. Every year looks the same. Same goals, same frustration, same unfinished promises. They tell themselves they need more inspiration, more energy, more confidence. What they actually need is a code, a non-negotiable structure that does not ask how they feel today. Because the truth no one teaches men is this: your feelings are irrelevant to mastery. Mastery does not respond to enthusiasm. It responds to consistency under pressure. The men who dominate any domain understand one thing early: starting is easy, continuing is rare. That's why society celebrates beginnings and ignores endurance. Anyone can start a business. Few survive 5 years. Anyone can train for a month. Few train for a decade. Anyone can talk about discipline. Few live under it. Inconsistency is not a moral failure. It is a structural failure. Men build systems that depend on mood, and moods are unstable. When results disappear, the system collapses. Because the system was never a system, it was emotion pretending to be discipline. The men who last build differently. They remove choice. They reduce friction. They simplify execution. They don't ask, "Do I feel like it today?" They ask, "What is required?" And they do it whether they feel powerful or empty. This is why most men secretly admire those who seem unshakable. Men who show up without drama, without announcements, without emotional speeches. That calm is not personality. It is training. The average man seeks comfort. The disciplined man seeks alignment. Alignment between word and action, between intention and behavior. And alignment only comes from repetition enforced by structure. That's why motivation is unreliable. It fluctuates with sleep, stress, dopamine, validation. Structure doesn't care. Structure is cold. Structure is indifferent. Structure is fair. It rewards whoever stays and punishes whoever leaves. This is the point where most men quit, not because the work is hard, but because it becomes boring, and boredom exposes character. Because boredom is the gatekeeper of mastery. If a man cannot endure boredom, he will never endure greatness. The men who rise do not eliminate boredom. They weaponize it. They train when nothing feels exciting. They repeat when progress is invisible. They execute when the mind screams for novelty. And slowly, something shifts. What once required effort becomes automatic. What once felt heavy becomes natural. What once demanded discipline becomes identity. This is where most men never arrive. Because they leave too early. They leave when results are delayed. They leave when praise stops. They leave when the mirror becomes honest. And that is why they start strong and die inconsistent. Not because they lack potential, but because they never built something strong enough to carry them through silence. There is a reason most men instinctively reject true mastery the moment they encounter it. Not because it's hard, not because it's complex, but because it humiliates the ego. The forgotten Japanese principle behind mastery does not begin with confidence, creativity, or self-expression. It begins with something modern men despise: obedience. Before strength, obedience. Before mastery, imitation. Before authority, silence. This is where the ego starts screaming. The modern man has been trained to believe his opinions matter from day one, that his uniqueness should be expressed immediately, that his way must be different. But mastery doesn't care who you think you are. It asks one brutal question first. Can you obey a standard without negotiating it? Most men cannot. They want to customize the process before they understand it. They want to innovate before they can replicate. They want to lead before they've learned how to follow. And that impatience poisons everything they touch. The Japanese principle of mastery does not flatter the beginner. It breaks him. It strips away personality, preference, and ego until only execution remains. In traditional systems, the apprentice does not ask why at the beginning. He copies, he repeats, he submits, not because he is weak, but because his perception is incomplete. The ego interprets obedience as humiliation. The disciplined mind understands it as compression. Compression creates density. Density creates force. This is why modern men bounce from system to system, mentor to mentor, technique to technique. They are not searching for truth. They are searching for something that doesn't threaten their self-image. But mastery is hostile to self-image. It demands that you admit, at a cellular level, that you are not yet qualified to have an opinion. That's hard for a man raised on instant validation. The Japanese understood something the modern world forgot. The ego must be trained like an animal, not obeyed like a king. When the ego leads, progress fragments. When discipline leads, progress compounds. This is why the principle feels ancient, rigid, even cruel, because it was designed for results, not comfort. You do not express yourself into excellence. You submit yourself into it. Only after the body learns the pattern does freedom appear. Only after obedience does intuition emerge. Only after silence does authority form. Men who reject this principle remain trapped in surface-level competence. They know just enough to talk, never enough to dominate. Because domination requires something rare, the ability to shut up and repeat. The Japanese principle doesn't care how motivated you feel. It doesn't ask for belief, it only asks for compliance. And compliance terrifies men who identify with their thoughts. Because the moment you obey a standard that doesn't adapt to you, your illusions die. That's why this principle was forgotten. Not because it stopped working, but because it no longer fit modern egos. Yet it remains the same gatekeeper it has always been. Either you kneel to the process, or you stay average with everyone else who refused. Most men want excellence for one reason: to be seen. They want recognition, respect, applause. And that desire alone disqualifies them from mastery. Because true excellence begins where visibility ends. Kodawari is the principle that exposes weak character faster than anything else. It is not about perfection for praise. It is about intolerance for mediocrity when no one is watching. That's why most men quit here. Kodawari asks a question your ego hates. Would you still do it perfectly if no one ever noticed? No promotion, no likes, no validation, no reward, just you and your standard. Most men answer that question without realizing it, by lowering the standard. They tell themselves, it's good enough. No one will notice. It doesn't matter. And every time they say that, something inside them weakens. Kodawari is not about being impressive, it's about being uncompromising. It trains a man to see what others ignore, to feel discomfort where others feel relief, to experience shame at mediocrity even when it's invisible. This is why Kodawari feels lonely, because when you raise your internal standard, you begin to live in a world others can't see. You notice misalignment, sloppiness, weak execution, and you cannot unsee it. Kodawari is not obsession with results. It is obsession with process integrity. The angle of the cut, the precision of the movement, the discipline of posture, the consistency of breath. Not because someone is watching, but because you are. Men without Kodawari live externally. Their standard floats based on circumstance. Men with Kodawari live internally. Their standard does not move. That internal standard becomes a form of self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of masculine authority. This is why Kodawari is so dangerous. It removes excuses. You can no longer blame the system. You can no longer hide behind effort. You can no longer perform mediocrity and call it progress. You either met the standard or you didn't. And that honesty is unbearable for most men. Kodawari forces you to redo what technically works but morally fails, to restart what could pass but doesn't feel right, to sacrifice speed for integrity. That's why most men rationalize instead. They optimize, they justify, they move on. But men who develop Kodawari cannot move on peacefully because they know. And that knowledge becomes pressure. Pressure that either forges discipline or crushes weak character. Over time, Kodawari rewires a man. He stops asking, "Did anyone notice?" and starts asking, "Did I violate my standard?" That shift changes everything. Work becomes cleaner, movement becomes sharper, presence becomes heavier. Not because he's trying harder, but because compromise is no longer an option. This is why real men obsess over what no one sees. Because excellence is not something you perform, it's something you cannot escape. And once Kodawari enters your life, mediocrity becomes unbearable, even when it's invisible. There is a reason repetition has been ridiculed in modern culture. It exposes impatience. It exposes arrogance. It exposes men who believe thinking is superior to doing. The modern man wants complexity. He wants advanced techniques. He wants shortcuts that make him feel intelligent. Repetition feels beneath him, and that belief alone guarantees mediocrity, because repetition is not about simplicity, it is about dominance. Repetition is how execution replaces intention. It is how the body overrides hesitation. It is how action becomes inevitable. Men who fear repetition are not afraid of boredom. They are afraid of discovering how weak their foundation actually is. Repetition removes the illusion of progress. There is nowhere to hide when you do the same movement, the same action, the same task, again and again, under the same standard. No novelty, no dopamine, no applause, just truth. That's why repetition is violent to the ego. The ego wants recognition. Repetition offers silence. The ego wants speed. Repetition demands patience. The ego wants expression. Repetition enforces precision. This is why dangerous men embrace repetition early. They understand something others don't. Repetition is not practice, it is programming. Every correct repetition carves a pathway in the nervous system. Every sloppy repetition engraves weakness. This is where most men unknowingly sabotage themselves. They repeat incorrectly, they rush, they improvise, and they wonder why nothing becomes automatic. Automaticity is power. When execution no longer requires thought, hesitation disappears. When hesitation disappears, confidence becomes irrelevant. You don't feel confident. You are capable. That's the difference. Men who rely on confidence collapse under pressure. Men who rely on repetition perform without emotion. This is why repetition is for the dangerous. A dangerous man does not rise to the occasion. He defaults to training. He does not think faster. He executes deeper. While others freeze, analyze, hesitate, he moves, because his body already knows the answer. Modern men hate repetition because it threatens identity. When you repeat, you are not special, you are mechanical, and mechanical efficiency terrifies men who confuse uniqueness with value. But mastery is mechanical first, expressive later. The men who dominate any field submit to repetition long before the field rewards them. They repeat when results are invisible. They repeat when feedback is absent. They repeat when the mind begs for novelty. And eventually, something shifts. The movement becomes cleaner. The action becomes sharper. The decision becomes faster. Not because they tried harder, but because repetition erased friction. This is why repetition separates men from boys. Boys chase stimulation. Men build inevitability. If you are not repeating, you are not training. You are entertaining yourself. And entertainment never produces mastery. There is a precise moment in every man's journey where truth reveals itself. It's not at the beginning. Beginnings are easy. It's not during early progress. Progress feeds the ego. The real test comes after effort stops producing visible results. That moment is where Gambaru begins. Gambaru is not motivation. It is not intensity. It is not enthusiasm. Gambaru is continuation without emotional reward. Most men collapse here. They tell themselves, "I'm not progressing anymore. This isn't working. I need a better method." No, they need a stronger spine. Because Gambaru begins where validation ends. This is the phase where effort feels pointless. where growth becomes invisible, where the gap between input and output stretches painfully long, and the modern man has been trained to interpret this phase as failure. It isn't. It is the threshold. Gambaru is the refusal to negotiate with discomfort, not explosive effort, sustained effort, not heroic bursts. Unromantic consistency. This is why Gambaru terrifies men. It removes drama. No speeches, no motivation videos, no external push, just repetition under fatigue, execution under doubt, discipline under silence. Men quit here not because the work is hard, but because the ego receives nothing in return. No praise, no certainty, no feedback loop, just faith in the process. And faith without evidence is something weak men cannot tolerate. Gambaru is not stubbornness. It is loyalty to a standard. It is choosing to continue without renegotiating the rules. The man who embodies Gambaru understands something brutal. Quitting is easy. Lowering the standard is easier. Persisting without compromise is rare. This is where time becomes the weapon. Most men think strength is intensity. It isn't. Strength is duration. Anyone can push hard for a month. Very few can maintain precision for years. That's why Gambaru destroys comparison. While others burn bright and fade, the man with Gambaru compounds quietly. Day after day, week after week, year after year, and eventually the gap becomes irreversible. This is the moment outsiders call it talent. They didn't see the years of invisible endurance. They only see the result. But the result was forged long before recognition arrived. Gambaru is what turns effort into inevitability. It teaches a man that quitting is not an option, not because someone told him not to, but because quitting violates his identity. At that point, discipline is no longer effort. It is alignment, and alignment is unbreakable. This is the line where most men quit. And this is where masters are selected. There is something most men don't want to admit. The modern world is not neutral. It is not designed to help you become excellent. It is designed to keep you average, distracted, and dependent. Every system around you pushes in the opposite direction of mastery. Speed over depth, convenience over discipline, comfort over competence. The modern world rewards surface-level performance. It punishes long-term focus. This is not accidental. A man who develops deep skill becomes independent. A man who becomes independent becomes difficult to control. So the system feeds you noise, infinite content, endless opinions, constant stimulation. All of it keeps your nervous system fragmented. Fragmented men cannot commit. Fragmented men cannot endure boredom. Fragmented men cannot submit to long processes. And without long processes, excellence is impossible. This is why modern men are busy but unskilled, informed but ineffective, motivated but unstable. They consume more knowledge than any generation in history, yet produce less mastery. Because information is not the problem. Attention is. Excellence requires sustained attention under discomfort. Modern systems destroy attention by design. Notifications, feeds, short clips, instant feedback. All of it trains the brain to crave novelty. And novelty is the enemy of repetition. The modern man tries to master something while living inside a system engineered to interrupt him every 5 minutes. That contradiction alone explains most failure. Excellence demands silence. The modern world sells noise. Excellence demands patience. The modern world sells speed. Excellence demands submission to one path. The modern world sells optionality. This is why the disciplined man feels out of place. He feels slow in a fast world, rigid in a flexible culture, obsessive in a casual society. And that discomfort makes most men retreat. They don't want to feel abnormal, but mastery has always required separation. Every great craftsman, warrior, builder, or leader in history lived against the current of his time. Not aggressively, not rebelliously, quietly. He chose standards the world did not reward immediately. This is the brutal truth. If you fully adapt to the modern world, you will never become excellent. Excellence requires selective rejection, rejection of constant stimulation, rejection of multitasking, rejection of endless options. The men who rise choose friction on purpose. They choose environments that demand focus, routines that remove choice, standards that punish laziness. They understand something critical. If the environment is easy, the man becomes weak. If the environment is demanding, the man adapts. The modern world removes demand, so the man must reintroduce it himself. This is not about nostalgia, it's about realism. If you want results that are rare, you must live in ways that are rare. And that means standing in direct opposition to modern convenience. Not loudly, not performatively, but consistently. At this stage, most men misunderstand mastery completely. They believe the goal is arrival, to finally make it, to reach a level where effort decreases and comfort increases. That belief is fatal. Kaizen destroys that illusion. Kaizen is not improvement for motivation. It is improvement as law. It is the acceptance that there is no finish line, no final form, no moment where you are done. And that truth scares men who crave security, because Kaizen removes the promise of rest. Most men secretly want excellence so they can stop, so they can relax, so they can finally feel enough. Kaizen denies that comfort, and paradoxically, that's why it creates strength. Masters are never satisfied, but they are never anxious either, because satisfaction is not what fuels them. Progress is. Kaizen shifts the reward from outcome to trajectory. Not, did I win, but did I improve? That shift is everything. A man who needs satisfaction becomes fragile. A man who commits to improvement becomes unstoppable, because improvement is always available, even on bad days, even after failure, even when results regress. Kaizen teaches a man to extract value from friction. Every mistake becomes data. Every weakness becomes direction. Every failure becomes instruction. Nothing is wasted. This is why masters appear calm under pressure. They are not calm because they are confident. They are calm because they are curious. They don't ask, what if I fail? They ask, what will this reveal? That mindset destroys fear. Kaizen also kills ego comparison. There is no ranking, no finish, no final judgment. Only today versus yesterday. And that comparison is brutal, but fair. Did you improve, or didn't you? Kaizen forces honesty. You cannot hide behind past success. You cannot rest on reputation. You cannot freeze your identity. The man who accepts Kaizen accepts eternal apprenticeship. And that humility is power. Because the moment a man believes he has arrived, he stops seeing. And when he stops seeing, decay begins. Kaizen keeps perception sharp. It trains a man to look for the smallest inefficiencies, the tiniest errors, the next millimeter, not obsessively, but attentively. This is why Kaizen never produces weak men. It produces men who are grounded, stable, and dangerous over time. They do not spike. They do not collapse. They compound. Kaizen is not pressure. It is relief. Relief from the need to be perfect. Relief from the fear of failure. Relief from the illusion of arrival, because the path itself becomes the reward. And once a man understands that, he stops chasing validation and starts building permanence. At this point, most men finally realize something uncomfortable. This code is not about skill. It never was. Kodawari, Gambaru, Kaizen. They are not techniques. They are character forges. When a man applies this code to one area of his life, it does not stay contained. It leaks. It spreads. It rewires everything. Because you are not training a skill, you are training a standard. A man who enforces precision in his work cannot tolerate sloppiness elsewhere. A man who persists without reward cannot collapse under pressure. A man who improves endlessly cannot stagnate emotionally. This is why mastery reshapes identity. Once you internalize a non-negotiable standard in one domain, your nervous system adapts to that level of demand. And the nervous system does not compartmentalize. That discipline shows up in how you speak, how you walk, how you decide, how you respond under stress. This is why some men feel heavy in a room without trying. They don't posture, they don't announce. Their presence is structured. They do not react emotionally. They do not rush decisions. They do not seek validation. They have trained patience, precision, and endurance so deeply that chaos no longer controls them. That carries into everything. In work, they don't panic. In relationships, they don't negotiate their values. In conflict, they don't escalate. They stabilize. Most men think this comes from confidence. It doesn't. Confidence is fragile. It disappears under pressure. What you're seeing is internal alignment. A man whose actions match his standards does not need confidence. He has proof. And proof is unshakable. This is why men who live under this code rarely need to speak about it. You see it in the results, in the calm, in the consistency. They don't chase balance. They enforce order. And order creates freedom. That is the real reward of this code. Not success, not money, not status, but sovereignty. Control over your actions regardless of circumstance. Most men never experience this because they live externally, reacting to incentives, moods, validation. The man who adopts this code lives internally. He carries the standard with him, and wherever he goes, the environment adapts, or he leaves it behind. Now everything collapses into one question, not a philosophical question, a practical one. A question your nervous system already knows the answer to. Are you willing to pay the price? Without guarantees, not for a month, not for a year, for as long as it takes. Because this is where boys step away quietly. They like the idea of mastery. They admire discipline. They respect consistency, but only until it interferes with comfort, only until progress slows, only until boredom sets in, only until no one is watching. Then they renegotiate. They soften the standard. They look for balance. They look for a smarter way. And that is where the path ends. The man who becomes dangerous does not renegotiate. He understands that the price is the point, that the discomfort is the filter, that the silence is the test. This code does not promise success. It promises transformation. And transformation requires sacrifice. You will sacrifice speed. You will sacrifice novelty. You will sacrifice approval. You will feel isolated at times, because when you raise your standard, you outgrow environments built on comfort. This is why few men walk this path. Not because it's impossible, but because it is unforgiving. There is no finish line where you can rest and be admired. There is only the next repetition, the next refinement, the next correction, forever. And most men don't want that life. They want results without pressure, respect without discipline, status without sacrifice. This code rejects all of that. It does not care what you want. It only responds to what you do. So the question is not whether this works. The question is whether you are willing to become the type of man this code demands. Because once you start, there is no comfortable way back. Here is the truth, without storytelling. Most men will hear this message, feel inspired for a moment, and change nothing. They will go back to consuming, back to planning, back to talking, and in 5 years, they will still be exactly where they are now, knowing more, doing the same. A smaller group will feel uncomfortable, exposed, provoked, and they will try to negotiate the code. They will apply it partially, selectively, when it feels good. They will get partial results and plateau. But a very small number of men will recognize what this really is. Not content, not motivation. A line. A line you either cross or don't. If you are one of those men, you already know what to do. Choose one domain, one craft, one path. Apply Kodawari, ruthless precision, even when no one sees. Commit to Gambaru, Persistence without emotional reward. Embrace Kaizen. Improvement without end. No shortcuts, no hacks, no excuses. If you are ready to walk that path, subscribe. Not because this channel will motivate you, but because it will hold you to a standard. And in the comments, write one area where you will apply this code. Not 10, not someday. 1. Few men will do it. That's why it works. Until the next lesson, stand firm, train in silence, and become dangerous over time. Katana Mental.